The night the escape began, Dannemora felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. The June sky hung low over Clinton Correctional Facility, thick with a stillness that didn't belong in a place filled with murderers, lifers, and broken men who had long since accepted that freedom was something that lived only in their dreams. The prison stood like a cold stone beast in the darkness, its towers lit by faint yellow lights, its walls stretching endlessly along the edge of the Adirondack wilderness. In that remote corner of New York, the world always felt quiet, but tonight the quiet felt sharper, heavier, as if the prison itself sensed that something was about to go terribly wrong. Inside those walls, two men moved with a purpose sharpened by desperation. Richard Matt and David Sweat, names that would soon rattle across every news channel in America, were working in a cramped metal-filled workshop that smelled of oil, sweat, and old secrets. They weren't supposed to be here this late. They weren't supposed to have tools. They weren't supposed to be planning an escape from one of the most secure prisons in the state. But the impossible was already in motion. It didn't start tonight. It began months before, with small conversations, stolen glances, whispered instructions, and the careful manipulation of people who had no idea they were being used. But now, on this silent night, all of those pieces finally slid into place. Sweat worked first. He was thinner, more deliberate, his movements precise. He held a stolen grinder, one he had manipulated a guard into trusting him with, and pressed it against a thick metal panel hidden behind his workshop station. Sparks jumped like fireflies, vanishing into the shadows. Sweat didn't flinch. His expression was calm, but inside his heart hammered like footsteps echoing down an empty hallway. Behind him stood Richard Matt, taller, older, more confident. Matt wasn't the type to show fear. He had lived too many lives, lied to too many people, charmed too many guards, and killed too many men to be frightened by a prison wall. But even he couldn't deny the weight of the moment. His breathing was slow, measured, as he watched sweat grind deeper and deeper into the metal. "This is it," Matt finally whispered, his voice low and almost excited. "We're closer than anyone will ever believe." Sweat didn't respond. He focused on the cut, on the way the metal grew thinner beneath his hands. He imagined the wall giving way, imagined the cold, stale air of the tunnels beneath the prison rushing forward like a ghost finally freed from its coffin. He pictured himself sliding through that hole, disappearing into the dark, running into the night. The grinder bit one last time, harder than before, and the metal plate cracked with a groan that Sweat swore echoed through the entire workshop. Both men froze. Silence. Nothing. No boots, no alarms, no shouting. Just the hum of old machinery and the faint drip of water somewhere deep in the pipes behind the wall. Sweat pushed on the plate. It shifted, then opened like a small metal door. Cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of rust, wet stone, and damp tunnels. The smell of somewhere no inmate should ever go. Matt grinned. Beautiful. Sweat climbed in first, sliding his long frame through the opening and landing on the narrow metal walkway behind the wall. It felt like stepping into the stomach of a machine. Pipes pounded quietly, wires hummed, and the air was colder and wetter than anything above ground. Matt squeezed in after him, his breath echoing. Behind them, the workshop looked almost peaceful. Normal. Like they had never touched a tool, never plotted a single thing. That was the beauty of their escape. It was a magician's trick executed in slow motion, piece by piece, behind the blind spots of a system that trusted more than it should have. They crawled into the darkness, and the walls shut behind them. The tunnels felt alive. Every pipe rattled like it carried secrets. Every surface dripped with condensation that chilled their skin. Sweat moved with the memory of hours spent studying smuggled maps and blueprint sketches, memorizing pathways by the shape of pipes and the number of turns. Matt followed close behind, the dark swallowing his broad shoulders. "This place feels like hell," Matt muttered. "It's our way out," Sweat whispered. As they crawled deeper, the tunnel grew narrower. The air grew hotter. The metal beneath their hands vibrated, and every so often, a burst of steam hissed loud enough to make Sweat's heart stop. The fear wasn't just that they'd get caught. It was that they'd die down here, boiled alive, electrocuted, or crushed under a pipe older than the men guarding it. But both of them had escaped worse situations. Prison wasn't their first nightmare. It was just the longest. "You sure this leads to the main steam chamber?" Matt whispered. "I'm sure," Sweat answered, though doubt flickered in his mind. One wrong turn and they'd end up in a dead end they couldn't back out of. But he had gone over this escape route hundreds of times. He could see it in his mind like a map burned into his skull. They crawled on, hands slipping on damp pipes, knees scraping rusted metal. Sweat pushed ahead, breathing hard, until the tunnel suddenly widened and opened into a massive chamber. He climbed out onto a metal grate that overlooked a forest of industrial pipes stretching upward into the darkness. The chamber felt endless, filled with echoes that seemed to whisper their names. Matt dropped down beside him. "This is it," Sweat said. "Once we climb up, we hit the catwalk. Then the maintenance tunnel. Then the manhole. Freedom," Matt murmured. But there was no joy in his voice. Just hunger. A hunger that had eaten at him for 20 years. They climbed the ladder slowly, carefully, every clang of the metal making their bodies stiffen as they listened for guards above them. But all they heard was the steady thrum of the prison's ancient heating system. At the top, they found the final tunnel, a narrow, winding industrial passageway that led straight toward the outer wall. Sweat crawled through it, his heart pounding harder with every foot. Matt followed, muttering curses each time the tunnel tightened around his shoulders. And then, they reached the manhole. Sweat pressed his ear against the metal. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. Just wind. And the faint sound of something rattling outside, probably tree branches hitting the fence. He pushed. The manhole groaned but didn't open. He pushed again. Still nothing. Matt climbed up beside him. "Move," he whispered. Matt planted his hands and shoved hard. The metal scraped loudly. For a moment Sweat felt sure someone outside must have heard, but the manhole finally slid open. A gust of cold night air blasted into the tunnel. It hit them like electricity. The smell of trees. Of damp earth. Of rain. Of freedom. Matt inhaled deeply, eyes half closed. "I haven't smelled air like that in years." Sweat hesitated, scanning the darkness. Remember, Tilly should be waiting near the power plant road. Matt nodded. They climbed out and crouched low. The forest around the prison was pitch black, the trees swaying softly. The outer wall loomed behind them, massive and cold. They had done it. They were outside the most secure prison in New York State. They were free. Or so they thought. They hurried to the rendezvous point, moving quickly but silently. Branches cracked under their feet. The cold bit into their skin. For the first time in years, they were exposed to open air, and for the first time in years, danger wasn't behind bars. It was everywhere. They reached the tree line. No car. No headlights. No Tilly Mitchell. Sweat's stomach dropped. Matt clenched his teeth. She panicked. They both knew it instantly. Tilly had promised to wait for them with her husband's pickup truck. She had promised to drive them far away before sunrise. Promised she wanted a new life with Matt. Promised she wasn't afraid. But fear had won. Matt let out a long breath, shaking with fury. "We wasted months trusting her." Sweat looked toward the prison. Alarms hadn't sounded yet, but he knew they would soon. As soon as the morning guards checked their cells. As soon as the stuffed dummies were uncovered. As soon as the lie unraveled. Matt grabbed Sweat's arm. "We go on foot." And they did. They ran into the forest, swallowed by the dark, their footsteps muffled by moss and roots. They didn't stop to breathe. Didn't stop to think. Their only thought, the only thing keeping their exhausted bodies moving, was the raw, wild, intoxicating idea of freedom. Behind them, Clinton Correctional Facility slept on, unaware that 2 of its most dangerous inmates had vanished into the night. But not for long. Hours later, as the early light of dawn crept across the prison walls, a guard walked past Sweat's cell and frowned. Something looked off. Too quiet. Too still. The blanket on the bed looked too neat. Too perfect. He approached slowly. "Hey, Sweat," he called. No answer. He tapped the blanket. It didn't react. Confused, he pulled it back. And froze. The blanket covered nothing but rolled-up clothes shaped into a body. His heart slammed against his ribs. He stumbled back, rushing to Matt's cell. Same thing. Same eerie fake body. Same stuffed clothes. Same silence. No. No, no, no. He dropped to his knees and checked beneath both beds. 2 holes stared back at him like open mouths. The officer grabbed his radio with shaking hands. "Control, control, we have an escape. 2 inmates missing. Matt and Sweat are gone." The prison erupted instantly. Sirens wailed through the halls. Boots thundered down corridors. Doors slammed. Guards shouted, panicked. Radios crackled with orders. Helicopters roared awake, blades slicing the morning sky. The town of Dannemora woke up to terror. Richard Matt and David Sweat were free. They were armed with nothing but their cunning, their desperation, and the belief that the world owed them one last chance. But freedom would not come easy, and the hunt for them would soon become one of the most intense, relentless, statewide manhunts in New York history. What waited in the woods would test them in ways the prison never could. And somewhere out there, beyond the trees, beyond the roads, beyond the reach of the sirens, 2 fugitives vanished deeper into the wild. The walls of Dannemora had finally breathed, and the nightmare had just begun.